Good morning, boys and girls.
Good morning, Pee-wee!
Welcome to my show, Maestro. Well, good morning. How do you do? Lots of surprises are just waiting for you. On your mark, get ready, get set. Now go, 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 because it's time now for the Pee-wee Herman Show.
This is the Nostalgic Future Podcast, where the past is the only way forward.
We're two guys in our 40s watching the world pass us by, and we know the only way we'll ever be relevant again is to somehow convince everyone to be as passionate as we are about our pop culture obsessions.
We are your hosts, Joe Cook and Chris Marchand, and today is our Pee Wee Herman tribute episode, remembering Paul Reubens 1 year later.
Well, here we are back for another episode, and we're going to do a kind of episode we haven't really done for a while. It is a rabbit hole episode, and we are really pleased to be able to offer a rabbit hole episode, which is really a tribute, a memorial to Paul Reubens, better known as Pee Wee Herman, or better known as Paul Reubens. He's a real guy, but this is somebody who, I don't know, Joe, tell me, he was ever present in my childhood. I couldn't ever get away from Pee-wee, and I didn't want to. I remember being at a babysitter. Like, I don't remember how young I was. I was like so young that the memories are barely there. I remember watching Pee-wee's Big Adventure, right? You know, like he was there from the beginning. You know, it wasn't long after I knew my parents that I knew Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah, I have more early childhood memories of Pee Wee Herman than I do of my parents. So, I mean,
there you go. That's right.
No, I mean, honestly, it was huge. Yeah. It was like Pee Wee mania. In our generation, it was ground zero for that. I mean, when I'm like 4 years old, my dad came home, brought home a Sony Betamax VCR, and they got HBO and started recording like every movie that played on the channel for about 2 or 3 years, and one such movie that we recorded was Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And so, and I'm like 5-6 years old, I must have watched that movie at least 100 times, if not more. I'm not exaggerating, like just over and over. I don't know how it must have drove my parents crazy, but I was obsessed with that movie. And then, of course, not long after that was Pee-wee's Playhouse, which was also huge. And so Pee-wee, huge part of my childhood. And then, because this is a tribute, you hate to like sort of bring up the negative, but, Pee-wee had a bit of a scandal when we were kids. And it was like, and that quick, he disappeared. So it was this like, blazing fire. And then it was just put out in an instant. And for years, really, it was kind of rare to see him pop up. And when he would show up in something, it was like, oh, it's Pee-wee. Even if it was Paul Reubens, the actor, playing a completely different role, you're kind of excited just to see him again. So yeah, I mean, what do you think of that? Because I can actually remember where I was the first time I saw his mugshot, and it was like traumatizing to me.
Okay. I don't remember, but I remember the event itself. If you were to ask me what I remember, I just remember it being on the news every night for like a month. Like I don't remember where necessarily, but it's just like, yeah, the mugshot, the story. And that was 91. So we were what, 9-10 years old, depending on, our birthdays. I'm trying to wrap my head around what's actually going on, right?
I remember I was in a grocery store, and it was, tabloid magazine, probably the National Enquirer, and the checkout line. And there's Pee-wee's, staring at me. Honestly, like as a 10-year-old kid, I don't think I'd ever really, even at that point, had ever really thought about who the actor was who played Pee-wee. It may have been the first time I ever really knew that he was Paul Reubens. And there's that face with that, gruff looking, like he looked like hell. With the beard, and it was just the most pitiful looking thing. Long hair, and
he looked like my kid version of, if there was a lineup and they'd be like, all right, young man, which one of those is a drug dealer? And I'd be like, that guy.
That's the guy. That's the guy.
That's a
Officer
drug
right
dealer.
there.
And they'd be like, no, son, that's Pee Wee Herman. What? No.
And it was, I can remember that moment to this day, like a little piece of my little heart inside died. And not even, again, like you said, not even really understanding what he did, just that Pee Wee got arrested, and that's not Pee Wee. No, it's like finding out Santa's not real. It was horrible.
Yeah, so I guess you could say a long stretch of, even decades long stretch of Pee Wee being ever present, and then the 40 years in the wilderness.
Yeah,
right. Kind of banished. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the mugshot. God, dude,
okay.
It looks like he's from the Manson family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. That's a good thought. Yeah. Okay, so when Paul Reubens dies, people start to release again or re-release interviews with him. And I listened to Conan. Conan did a tribute on his podcast. There's this podcast called Bullseye with Jesse Thorne. He re-released an interview that was probably one of his more recent interviews. What happened is it set me off on my grand adventure. I had a Pee Wee's Big Adventure. And the first place that I started was the Pee Wee Herman Show, which was the original HBO show. And from there, YouTube led the way, right? And this is where the rabbit hole element comes in. And you know what? It's good that you brought up the whole, he was part of our childhoods and then he wasn't there. Because everything, in some ways, a vast majority of what I kind of want to discuss is all of these things that I would never really have known about, because, like there was a few sitcoms that Pee Wee Herman appeared on. I didn't know about those. And there would have been no way for me to ever find out about or be able to see them apart from YouTube and apart from people posting things online. So that's my rabbit hole, right? I started with the original HBO and just let the algorithm lead the way. And it just led to just this endless stream of discovering different things that Paul Reubens had been a part of. And it was crazy. It was a crazy couple of months. I would update my wife. I'd be like, well, I'm watching this today. And she's like, wow, you are really going into it, aren't you? Yep, I am. I'm strapped in. I'm going to watch every Paul Reubens appearance ever. And I think I still have a few things on my list I didn't quite get to. So I'm a little bit ashamed, but I did okay.
So my son and I watched a few episodes of Pee Wee's Playhouse. Now, I had not seen Pee Wee's Playhouse, since I was 8 years old, probably, like 9. I was pretty little, the last time I saw that show. And I remembered loving it growing up. I had the toys, I was totally down with it. But, you haven't seen something in over 30 years. It's a little hazy. We're watching it, and I turned, and we're just kind of looking at each other like, this is psychotic. But it was great. Really, we were laughing our heads off from beginning to end of every episode that we watched. And one of the things that my son said that was, I thought, really a great observation, because it's true, because you mentioned the HBO special. The HBO special was a comedy special for adults, and yet Pee Wee's Playhouse was sort of a spin-off from that. It was the HBO special was the basis for what became the kids show. And my son doesn't know. He'd never seen the HBO special. As we're watching it, Joey, he says to me, he goes, this feels like a parody of kids shows. I said, well, that's exactly what it is. He made a parody of a children's show, and then he turned it into a children's show. It's really kind of super meta when you think about it.
Yeah, that is actually interesting. So, actually, let's talk about that when we get to that segment, because that's what's interesting, is the creation of the character Pee Wee Herman. There's elements to that. And then there's whatever this show was. And then there is Paul Reubens, the comedian, Paul Reubens, the writer, right? The performer. And there's just all these different aspects of him. And I think it's worth talking about it. So when we get to some of the other appearances it's not just Pee Wee Herman parodying a kid's show. It's Pee Wee Herman, the performance artist, because he kind of lived in the real world. And that's another aspect of it. I saw so many talk show appearances that's what's also meta is like, well, wait, he's real, right? Like in doubting the reality of it.
Well, that's the interesting thing, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but you said something that stuck with me, and bear in mind that we're now finally talking about this. This has been months of conversations. I didn't go into nearly as big of a rabbit hole that you did with this, but I did rewatch all of the movies. I watched Playhouse. I did watch some clips that you sent me, and I sent you a few. I remember watching the first movie and then going from that and into watching the second film, which, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, the movie. But just commenting to you, going like, well, like, why is he a farmer now? Because in the second movie, suddenly now he's on the farm and he's got a pig that talks to him and all these stupid farm things. And you said that Pee Wee Herman is sort of a real life cartoon character, and so that every version of Pee Wee you see is almost in its own universe.
Yeah. Do we ask that about Bugs Bunny? Right? We have a new Bugs Bunny short. He's in a completely different situation. Do we go, what's he doing?
Yeah.
Why is he acting as a police officer now? This doesn't make sense.
Well, why is Elmer Fudd a 16th century opera singer in this
exactly,
in this episode? So yeah, and that actually, honestly, I hadn't really thought about it, and it gave me a lot of context. I'm like, okay, so now as I approach Pee Wee, I'm going to look at it, and the Pee Wee of Pee Wee's Big Adventure is a different Pee Wee than the Pee Wee of Big Top, Pee Wee or whatever, or the Pee Wee's Playhouse. Though I say that, like, Pee Wee isn't all that different, but the world around him changes, and the way he reacts to that world changes to a certain extent. I mean, I would say the second movie almost felt like the least Pee Wee his character was. Like, his character felt a little off in that movie, as opposed to everything else. But it very much does feel like this cartoon character. So, and then occasionally he pops into our world too. And, so as I'm watching, I watched the Pee Wee's Christmas special, and, there's Cher with Pee Wee. And I'm thinking to myself, well, is this the real Cher, or is this a cartoon Cher in Pee Wee's world? It's a very, very absurd reality that the character lived in, or many realities that he lived in.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so, you know what? You said something early on, like right after he died. You didn't say it to me. You said it online. I don't even remember where it was being responded to, but some person said, and they actually said it in good faith. I mean, it's actually a decent opinion, which is, hey, I just want to make people realize Paul Reubens wasn't just Pee Wee Herman. He was a great comedic actor. He had lots of other great roles, and voice roles, and and that's cool. I think that's really good to point that out. But you said something. You had a really good response, and it was this. It was like, hey, listen, he invented one of the most iconic comedic characters of all time, kind of out of thin air. And the invention of Pee Wee Herman, it's not that we're diminishing Paul Reubens' skill. No. We're pointing out this, like, what the heck is it? Like, what is even happening with the phenomenon of Pee Wee? And that, I think, is maybe part of what I want to bring up today is Pee Wee Herman is strange. Like, the existence of this guy, like Joey, your Joey said, is like, I think this is a parody of a kid's show. It's like, yeah, man. Like what did we just get invited into? And like, I want to touch on, his David Letterman and Joan Rivers and Arsenio Hall appearances, because it was zany and out there. And it's one of the strangest comedic experiences of my life, is just trying to understand, like, as an adult. As a kid, he was just happy, fun guy, Now, as an adult, I'm going like, wait, like, what is he actually doing? And so that's why there's so much to unpack with Paul Reubens and Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the comment that you were talking about, like, Paul Reubens, the man, like the artist, was brilliant. but Pee Wee Herman defined an entire decade. And I mean, he's probably the like comedy icon of the 1980s. Like if there's, I mean, what comes close to that? I mean, what, Ernest? Ernest was pretty big, but not Pee Wee big.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also to touch on what you did earlier on is, and I almost don't know what to feel about this because it is really strange. Pee Wee was both for adults and kids. And so that first stage show, was it at the Roxy or whatever it was in LA? Yeah. I mean, that was an adult show. I mean, there was jokes about looking up women's skirts. There was undertones of sexual stuff, kind of slightly, perverted jokes and everything. And then when he gets to David Letterman, like that's completely for adults. Like he's messing with us as adults, right? He's a cartoon character. He's maybe like a marionette puppet come to life. He's a kid's show, Howdy Doody come to life or whatever. And then he's just messing with Dave.
Are you having a nice summer, Pee Wee? Did you enjoy yourself?
I've been having a great summer, because of this show. I've been having a great summer because so many people have been watching it, and everything that out in Hollywood now there's like, what we call a buzz, about me going on out there,
Right.
And in fact, I was at this meeting the other day because I've been, taking a lot of meetings and stuff, and these people were looking at some tapes, and they were looking at some tapes of you and me, from your show, and they were going like, maybe this guy, David Letterman, would be the perfect person to team you up with. Really, I swear, they were saying this whole stuff. So, if you want it, it's there, I think, in the future. Because, if I get it, you're in.
Oh, thanks.
I do.
Very nice of you.
Really, because it'd be great.
Now,
Hey, stare contest. You looked away.
yeah.
You looked away.
Yeah. Maybe I would be the perfect one to team up with you, Pee Wee.
He's messing with Dave, bringing out his toys, dressing up for Halloween. It's very adult, but also kind of playful, kind of for kids. That's what's so bizarre about it, is it's offsetting because you don't quite know what to make of it.
Well, when I was growing up, I didn't know about the adult persona at all.
Zero.
And I remember, it must have been like Comedy Central or something, running the HBO special probably in the late 90s or maybe even early 2000s. I mean, it was well later, or I was either my older teens or my early 20s, and seeing that for the first time, going, what the heck is this? And having my mind somewhat blown, and even just like, watching Pee-wee's Playhouse again, and going back and watching Pee-wee's Big Adventure again. Those are kind of mind-blowing experiences, and they're all different in their own way. It's a really, really fascinating thing because, the character, the character was developed like the mid-70s. What was it? I think maybe you sent me a clip. Was he on the dating game?
Yeah. So he was on the dating game show, which is really, really interesting. And so this is one of these early examples where he was a performance artist piece. He along with Phil Hartman and the Groundlings, he kind of just emerged. One of the things that Herman has said in a lot of interviews is, and this is actually kind of true. The more you watch Pee-wee, the more you'll realize this is true. He doesn't really write very many jokes. Paul Reubens is not a joke teller. It's not that kind of comedy. If you watch early stand-up of Pee-wee, he's the joke is the character and like his little games or toys that he brings along. The dating game is really, really interesting because like he has all these jokes. Like he's like a 12-year-old trying to find a girlfriend on the dating game show. And so like you have these guys that these 70s guys that are like, hey man, yeah, I'll take you out and I'll show you a good time. And he's like, well, sometimes I want to show you like my yo-yo collection, like it's like so you have like these super sexy, like kind of hippie-ish, stud guys, and then like this kid. It's like, what the heck is happening, right?
Good luck, bachelors, because one of you is going to be very happy. Good luck. Here we go.
Okay, guys, you ready?
Yes.
Yep. Bachelor number 1. What's the first thought that comes to your head when you hear the word hot?
When I hear the word hot, I think of summer, I think of beaches, I think of sand, I think of rolling in the sand, and I think of sweating a lot.
All right, you're coming from the same place I am. Number 2, what's the first thought that comes to your mind when you hear the word go?
When I hear the word go, I think about when I was taking traffic school lessons and when I was driving in my car and going real fast in my little Volkswagen bus and speeding down the street real fast and trying to get over to your house.
And it's funny because he's like trolling the whole thing, having fun with it, and it's hilarious. Everybody loves him, by the way. They don't mind being trolled,
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that I saw, I must have watched some, I think it was like a YouTube sort of documentary about Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and the movie, everything feels spontaneous. Everything feels like it's just happening. Like like you could believe it was improvised, and yet it was so scripted. And they didn't deviate from the script at all. Every ridiculous little, interaction that he had, his little arguments that he would have, where they're going back and forth, and it feels so fluid and it feels so real.
Morning, Pee-wee.
Look, Francis.
Today is my birthday, and my father said I can have anything I want.
Good for you and your father.
So guess what I want?
A new brain.
No, your bike. Oh, what's so funny, Pee-wee?
It's not for sale, Francis.
My father says everything's negotiable, Pee-wee.
I wouldn't sell my bike for all the money in the world. Not for $100 billion, million, trillion dollars.
Then you're crazy.
I know you are, but what am I?
You're a nerd.
I know you are, but what am I?
You're an idiot.
I know you are, but what am I?
I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, but what am I?
I know you are, but what am I? Infinity.
No, I'm not. You
are.
are. No way. Knock it off. Cut it out. Oh, shut up, Pee-wee.
Why don't you make me?
Why don't you make me?
Because I don't make monkeys. I just train them.
Oh, Pee-wee, listen to reason. Oh, come on.
I'm listening to reason.
Pee-wee.
That's my name. Don't wear it out.
Remember the first time I saw your bike? You were riding past my house and I came running out to tell you how much I liked it even way back then?
I love that story.
Every little pause and stutter was scripted. And yet, that was like the brilliance of that script, which was co-written, you mentioned, by Phil Hartman. He co-wrote that film with Paul Reubens. And there was a third guy. Who?
There was a third guy. Poor third guy.
There was two guys I heard of and then another guy.
We love you too. You're a legend as well in our hearts, in the back of our brains.
All that to say, what a tremendous script. I mean,
yeah.
Right. And that movie is incredible. I mean, it's
incredible.
I had not seen it since I was, probably again 8 or 9 years old. How about you? Like when had you seen it last?
I can't quite remember, but I seem to remember like somewhere in my mid-20s I revisited it, and it hasn't been since then. So I'm 42 now.
Gotcha. So yeah. For me, it had been over 30 years, and it held up just as well for me at 42 as it did when I was 8.
Yeah. Okay, so let's have a quick pause here. One of the ongoing things we do in this podcast is we touch on, are we able to pass this on to the next generation? Well, like, the Beatles, like, will our kids or our grandkids be listening to the Beatles? That type of question. And what I found really, really interesting and heartbreaking was when we watched Pee-wee's Big Adventure with my kids, And my kids were just not really tracking with it. They didn't really find it funny. And I think they were put off by this lunatic with his annoying voice. He was too over the top. And your Joey seemed to kind of track with it. What I wonder is, we were growing up in the aftermath of the 50s and 60s, and so we still got kind of that old timey, like I grew up still watching the Bozo the Clown Show,
me too.
Captain Kangaroo, and like Price is Right. Like, we got some of this kind of stuff of the vaudevillian nature of early TV, and I don't know what to do with it, Joe, because I was really sad. I was like, guys, this is like a comedy legend, and you're just kind of like, this guy's annoying. Ugh. Like, and I was like, oh no, what have I done? So I don't quite know what to do with that, because part of me, you know what, maybe another reflection is, there's a lot of comedy, kind of like almost like Rodney Dangerfield type comedy that just isn't really relevant anymore. People people still acknowledge him as a comedic legend, but they're like, do I have to listen to some more, hey, how about my wife jokes? It's
I was watching I was watching Johnny Carson on like Freevee or Pluto TV or something. It was like, there's a Johnny Carson channel where they just run nothing but Johnny Carson, and I put it on yesterday. I hadn't seen a Rodney Dangerfield joke in like 25 years, but Rodney was on doing stand up, and what was the joke? It was typical Rodney. I get no respect.
Right.
I get no respect. I went to the psychiatrist, and I told him, Doc, I'm having suicidal tendencies, and my doctor says, you got to start paying up front. Boom, boom.
Oh, thanks, Rodney.
That was pretty much that was the gist of the entire set.
Yeah, and it's fun. Like, we like it. We can kind of chuckle, and I do actually think Dangerfield is kind of funny, and yet we also acknowledge, man, he's out of touch. That we've moved past that kind of comedy.
Yeah.
And what I wonder, to my grief, to my great shame, have we moved on, and is Pee-wee difficult for younger generations to grasp onto and have fun with?
It's interesting because Joey really did track with it.
Yeah.
Like, quite a bit. I mean, he really enjoyed 2 of the 3 movies. and Pee-wee's Playhouse, had him in stitches. And in fact, he commented on the fact that he thought that in a lot of ways Pee-wee's Playhouse was ahead of its time, and that it didn't feel like an 80s show. And some of that is there is a lot of 1950s and 60s sort of aesthetic to the show. But beyond that, like, the sort of random chaos of the humor, he felt, was more in line with some of the modern humor. In fact, one of the ways he put it, he said, this show is like one giant meme.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. The fast pace.
Yeah.
It is so rapid. It's so rapid. That's actually true. And then it'll go to the next thing. Like, you'll have a penny clip, or he'll show old cartoons, right? He'll show
King Cartoon. Comes out with the cartoons, which I love, because it's like, okay, he literally just went and got like the crappiest like public domain cartoons that he could show.
It's great. Yeah, I love that stuff. And then he did that in the original stage show as well, and it's really cool. So I guess that's good. It's good to know, and maybe my kids will come around. Maybe their comedic sensibilities will grow a little bit.
Well, I wonder. My son he's 17 years old. He's gonna be 18. And I just maybe he wouldn't. I never played it for him. Growing up, it was just not something that I did. It kind of, in a way, I'm sort of ashamed that it took Paul Reubens dying for me to actually revisit this thing that was so important to me as a kid. But maybe it wouldn't have hit the same when he was younger. Maybe Pee-wee is funnier the older you get now. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think some of my kids, they're in the place where if they perceive something is kiddie, it's too much for the kids, then they immediately reject it. They don't really give it the fair shake. and they're like, yeah, oh man, this is just a dumb kids show. And it's like, oh man, if you only knew like the layers of what's going on here, you know, like
it's brilliant.
You could see it. It's brilliant.
It's brilliant. And you know what? When we were watching Pee-wee's Playhouse, one of the things that came to mind is have you ever compared, like, I don't know if, like, have you watched a lot of Sesame Street when your kids were little?
I used to, not lately.
Okay. When Joey was little, we watched Sesame Street with him. And I hadn't seen Sesame Street since I was his age. So, that Sesame Street's not a show that you think about after the age of 5. And then you have kids, and then you think about it again for another 5 years or whatever. One of the things we did was, when he was little, we went out and bought this DVD set. It was called Sesame Street Old School. And we put in the DVD, and it started with a disclaimer, a warning saying it was not really intended for kids, which is ridiculous because it's Sesame Street. But what it was is, it was all of this stuff from the 70s, and you realize, oh, they were doing the show completely different in the 70s and early 80s than the Sesame Street of today, and had a completely different sensibility to it. And what I found is, like, 1970s Sesame Street was hilarious. I loved watching it with Joey. It was like, to the point where, like, let's just watch an old one. I don't want to watch the new ones. The new ones are mind numbing, but the old ones, you had, like, Frank Oz and Jim Henson, and it had that. It kind of had, it was like the Muppets, but toned down just enough to be educational, but it was genuinely funny. And in a way, watching Pee-wee was reminding me of watching, like, older Sesame Street, where it had a little bit of an edge to it. You know what I mean? We're in the Christmas special, Pee-wee's Pee-wee's written a Christmas list so big that Santa has to tell him there's not enough gifts to give anybody else, and none of the kids in the world are going to get any gifts because they're all going to Pee-wee. And Pee-wee is like, oh well.
Santa! I knew you'd come. Here's your milk and cookies, just the way you like them.
Cookies.
But first, did you bring me all the presents I asked you for?
Well, yes, of course I did, Pee-wee.
Well, then help yourself.
But there is one little problem.
What problem?
Well, your Christmas list was so big that I just didn't have enough presents for the other children in the world.
Gee, I'm awfully sorry to hear that, Santa. Please let me know how it all turns out.
Oh. Yeah. So maybe this is an element we can bring in about the Pee-wee character is, yes, he's at his best when he's zany, but I would argue, like, one of the funniest scenes of the original film is when he has everybody down in the basement and he's ranting, going crazy.
Oh, it's incredible.
It's an incredible scene.
Let's begin, shall we? Shall we?
This box contains over 217 bits and pieces of information. Evidence. Exhibit A, a photograph of the victims, my bike, and me. Exhibit B, another photograph.
What's missing from this picture? It's just me, without my bike!
Is this something you could share with the rest of us, Amazing Larry? Exhibit C, the horn I was picking up
at Chuck's Bike-O-Rama
when my bike was actually stolen.
And when he gets irritated with Dave Letterman, right? And he's like, no, Dave, that's the Pee-wee that I love. He's a little bit innocent, but he's also just a selfish little jerk. And that's when he's really funny. I love that Pee-wee. That's when he's most compelling. So, hey, let's talk about this, because I want to get into a few of the things that I actually watched, because I went down the rabbit hole. It was kind of crazy, really. What would you rank then as Reubens's Pee-wee accomplishments?
Okay, so obviously the popular answer is going to be Pee-wee's Big Adventure as being his, magnum opus. And I would agree with that. The film is tremendous. But I got to be honest with you. I'm not even sure that that's the movie I laughed hardest at. I really, really laughed quite a bit during the third movie. Now, I say that. I fully recognize that in no way is the third movie as good as the first movie. The first movie is a great film, but the third one is a really funny film. The second one is dreadful.
Yeah, the second one is really unfortunate. And maybe I want to add this because it's worth talking about. If you listen to enough Paul Reubens interviews, Reubens would often talk about potential projects. And maybe that's one thing that really bums me out about Pee-wee and what happened in 1991 is that Big Top Pee-wee was not the first film. Like there was other scripts, there was other ideas, and that's the one they happened to make. Like it's really a bummer. Big Top Pee-wee visually has some good stuff in it, but boy, is that an utter disaster. I mean, there's some moments, maybe I'll give it like a few decent comedic moments, and most of it is like a big cringe fest. I don't know what happened there. I don't know who greenlit it. It's unfortunate that Tim Burton decided not to make it, but he's making Beetlejuice and his Batmans and whatever, right? What I find interesting is early on also, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Reubens talked about recording an album. He had like all these songs he said he was recording with different artists. So there was going to be a Pee-wee album. In the last decade of his life, they were talking about like Pee-wee Goes to Jail or whatever it was.
Like there was going to be a dark Pee-wee movie. That was something he talked about quite a bit.
Quite a bit. I think he had been thinking about it for years and years. I think maybe one thing we have to look forward to is there's going to be a Paul Reubens memoir coming out at some point. And so he wrote it. He wrote his autobiography, and I haven't heard anything since then, but I'm assuming I heard it was done. So that'll be good. I mean, I think I would plan to buy that, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
That's going to be kind of on my list. As an artist type person, it really is heartrending to think about various projects that never got completed, right? And so there you go. And then Big Top Pee-wee got completed. That
you know what? I've long said, are you a fan of the Rocky movies?
I'm a huge fan of the first one, and the other ones I'm just sketchy on. So I can't really say.
Yeah. The first Rocky movie obviously is tremendous. The second one is great. The third one, it gets goofy, but it's still a really enjoyable movie. Fourth one, iconic, cheesy but iconic, really fun movie. The fifth one is really bad. And it's pretty legendarily bad. You know what I mean? And I've said for years that when he released, I think it was probably 2005 or 6, he released the movie Rocky Balboa. It was basically Rocky 6, but it was called Rocky Balboa.
It was kind of a reboot, wasn't it?
It was kind of a resolution to the series. It was supposed to be capping it off. This is years before they made the Creed spin-offs. He was ending the character at that time with this movie. And when I saw Rocky Balboa, I had a feeling when I watched it. And it was the same feeling I got when I watched the third Pee-wee movie. Was it Pee-wee's Big Holiday? Yeah. Which is the Netflix movie for anybody who hasn't seen it. As I was watching that movie, I had the same feeling I had when I watched Rocky 6. And that was, oh, okay. This isn't the greatest movie in the world, but this is a good enough movie. This is the apology for Rocky 5. And as I was watching Pee-wee's Big Holiday, I thought, oh, he didn't want Big Top Pee-wee to be the last Pee-wee movie. So he made this. This is harmless, This is a fun, enjoyable movie. It's actually very funny. It's not the greatest Pee-wee movie, but at least he didn't go out on that last one. And it felt good because of that.
Yeah. Listen, I didn't really enjoy Pee-wee's Holiday, but you know what? I can endure it, and it's cute. And there's some moments in there that I really like. I think
we laughed our heads off. I got to be honest, we really did.
Yeah. There's a lot of it that doesn't work for me, but I am glad he did it. The balloon gag that he does, I think, is hilarious.
Amazing.
That's one of the funniest
best part of the movie. Best part
of the movie. And maybe the balloon gag is a great example of Paul Reubens saying, hey, I don't do jokes, but I do this. you know, you know, and it's like, I don't know how he came up with that. And part of the Pee-wee character is exemplified in the balloon joke, which is, I'm going to do something annoying. And when you think I'm done, I'm going to keep going.
He's trolling the audience. I mean, it's not even just it's Andy Kaufman-esque in a way.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like I'm going to entertain you, and then I'm going to irritate you, and by the end of it, you're going to think I'm the greatest entertainer in the world.
You're going to be laughing at how irritated you are.
If you stick with me and you see this thing through, you'll get the brilliance of it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, you know, I guess I'm kind of with you. I think the film, the original film, is, you know, the achievement, but maybe I would even say the kids' TV show is the achievement because of how tightly packed that was and of what they did over time and the puppetry and his interaction with it. I don't know. I guess I'm a fan of the TV show.
I would argue that the film is his greatest achievement just because of how brilliant Pee-wee's Big Adventure is. But the television show is the absolute most natural habitat for Pee-wee. It is like that character exists in, you know, we talked at the beginning about the different worlds that Pee-wee exists in. Pee-wee he's pure. He's home in the context of the television show. The character works better in that insanity than he does anywhere else. In fact, if anything, it allows him the opportunity to be both insane and the straight man because of the insanity around him.
That's right. So, you know what's interesting? Since I watched over 2 hours of him on David Letterman and Joan Rivers and Arsenio Hall and other places, I think you're right. He was being on those late night talk shows. He was being the Pee-wee's Playhouse version, except in the real world. Because there's something about those appearances where he could just play around and goof around that it was almost like he was trying to be the TV show, trying to be Pee-wee's Playhouse, and he didn't realize it yet. Like he didn't realize he could like flip it into his own world. And actually, my biggest critique of some of his appearances is that old curmudgeon himself, David Letterman, is he actually ruined, I think. I want to like slap David Letterman around a little bit. Like, if you watch some of those clips of Pee-wee on the early shows, Letterman's like strangely uncomfortable. He's like your Midwestern uncle who's like, I don't know what this is. I don't like this, you know? So it's almost like Dave didn't understand. No one told him the rules of improv, right? Dave, you got to yes and Pee-wee. You got to yes and him. And he kind of just shut him down. And I'm like, come on, dude, you have this golden opportunity. And you're acting uncomfortable. I will say this: the Joan Rivers show appearances are much funnier because she plays with him. She treats him like a little boy, and it's hilarious.
And this is my toy phone system right here. Can I take phone calls? Like,
You were on the phone when you hosted the show, and I thought we could play a couple of tricks, maybe.
Phone trick?
Yeah, would you like that?
I'd love to.
Phone for you.
Phone for me.
Now, what would you like to do? Who would you like? I got a phone too, just in case.
Just call anyone?
Call. Who do you want to call?
Let's see. Shut up!
I thought we could call restaurants.
Great idea.
Okay. Who do you want to call? What restaurant do you want to call?
Will people be able to hear what's going on?
Yes, who are you calling?
I don't know.
Hi, baby. I could hardly wait to hear.
She was in the Christmas special.
Oh, was she? I haven't seen the Christmas special in a very long time.
Very brief cameo, very brief, but she was in it.
Let the cartoon!
Oh, excuse me, Your Majesty. Would you mind if I said it just this once?
Be my guest, Annette.
I've always wanted to do this. Let the cartoon begin.
Sure, but I wouldn't try it with a bar of soap.
Look, it's Joan Rivers.
Hi, Pee-wee. Hi, Annette. Hi, King. Happy holidays, everybody.
Merry Christmas, Joan.
I love Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers is one of those instances. As a kid, I hated that woman. I was annoyed by her, and then something clicks as an adult, and you're like, oh my goodness, this lady's funny. This lady knows comedy, And the Pee-wee episodes with her on her own show is just wonderful. Watch those instead of Dave, even though the Dave ones are kind of more iconic in some ways. So yeah. Can I run down a few more things?
Yeah. So what else did you watch?
So
you sent me a lot of clips, so I know you watched a lot of stuff.
So let me run down just a few of the individual things that I watched, and then I want to talk about one thing in particular because it's so kind of bizarre. All right, so I watched Paul Reubens, a few clips of him on The Gong Show, which is where he found some initial recognition as a comedian, not as Pee-wee, but as different acts within The Gong Show. He said that's a way that he made money early on. I watched Pee-wee hosting SNL. I watched Pee-wee, and yes, Pee-wee, in a Cheech and Chong movie. I can't really quite remember this. I'm blanking on this, but he was in the Blues Brothers. He was on
as a different character. Correct?
As a different character. This was as Paul Reubens, he was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you had to point me on to this one. He was on a Frankie and Annette movie. You said that was iconic for you. I had never seen that one. And this was nuts, by the way. That was nuts.
So it was a huge one for me, and it's almost embarrassing to say that. But what I'll say is, okay. First off, by the way, Frankie and Annette also in the Christmas special.
I got to watch this Christmas special.
and very funny in it. But so there was this movie called Back to the Beach that came out in the mid-'80s, and so here's the deal with that movie. It's just, when you're a kid, it's just one of those movies your parents drag you to. You know what I mean? And I saw this movie in the theater. And my biggest takeaway as a, 6-year-old, however old I was, 6 or 7 when that movie came out, was that Pee Wee Herman had a scene in the movie. And that was huge to me. And I sort of loved the movie as a little kid because of this really crazy Pee Wee Herman scene in the movie. He's in the movie for like 5 minutes, if that. And he sings a song, "The bird is the word," and
which he says quite a lot. I mean, it's like it's
the bird,
it's going.
Bird is the word.
Everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, bird, bird. Well, the bird is the word. Well, the bird, bird, bird. Well, the bird is the word. Well, the bird, bird, bird. Well, the bird is the word. Well, the bird, bird, bird. The bird's the word. Well, the bird, bird. The bird is the word. Well, the bird, bird. The bird is the word. Well, the bird, bird, bird. Well, the bird is the word. Well, the bird, bird, bird. Well, the bird is the word. Well, the bird, bird. Bird is the word. Well, don't you know about the bird? Well, everybody knows that the bird is the word. Well, the bird, bird. The bird's the word. Well, surfing bird. Oh!
I felt like I was like being hypnotized, like entranced by something strange.
It is just this really out there sequence that ends with him, I think, flying off on a surfboard at the at the end of the song, and as fast as he arrived, just as quickly he was gone, never to be seen again. In and out of the movie like that. But as a little kid, that's another one of those movies that, and I think that movie was on TV quite a bit in the late 80s. I watched that a lot as a kid, just for that dumb scene with Pee Wee Herman. There was some kind of goofy stuff. You talked about us being, our parents were obviously like products of the 50s and 60s, and so we were very aware of that. So like Gilligan and Skipper were in that movie as the Gilligan and Skipper. There were a lot of like goofy little things like that made that movie really fun for me as a 6-year-old. Now, I want to say, as for this podcast, I fully intended to rewatch that movie. And I even went as far as renting it from the library. And our family was going to sit down and we were thinking about watching it. And I said, you know what, let's watch the trailer first. And we were just all like, yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah.
So I went on YouTube and just watched the Pee-wee scene again because that was really all I needed for this purpose.
Yeah, I've never actually seen a Frankie Internet film, but I get the whole gist of it. Like, right? Like even in the That Thing You Do, there's kind of like parodies of that kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
and I think this is kind of like, I think Back to the Beach was almost like an 80s parody of those 60s movies. It was very much an 80s movie more than like a, a 60s film or whatever, but it had a lot of that, callbacks to that era. But Pee-wee was not one of them. Pee-wee was just there. And it's quite, I mean, I really do recommend anybody, if they've never seen the movie, at least go on YouTube and just watch the Pee-wee song from the film. It's bonkers.
Yeah. Well, okay, so a couple of other things that I watched there, the show 227.
Oh, 227.
227. See, I don't even know.
Well, that was amazing. 227.
See, it's funny. This is one of these weird things.
You'd never seen it, right?
Yeah, I knew a lot of the actors on the show, but for some reason, I've never even heard of that show in my brain. Something is missing.
You hadn't even heard of it. Well, okay, you just called it 227.
I just
so
call it
not.
227.
Exactly.
I just proved it to you.
I grew up watching that show like all the time. It was one of those shows that was on in like syndication, so it was always on in reruns or whatever.
I feel like I was in one of these like pop culture, wormholes where we were in separate realities, right? Like I know those actors, but I never heard of that show. Anyway, whatever. He was in an episode of that. They get trapped in a toy store and held at gunpoint, like some guy's robbing the toy store, and like he's Pee Wee Herman. It's very, very goofy, very strange.
Whoa, you expecting somebody?
Yes, my cousin, the police chief.
Oh. Don't mess with me, lady. I mean it. Don't, all right? Can't anybody read signs anymore? Listen, we're...
Oh, good! You're open!
Boy, toy stores just knocked me out.
This is Pee Wee Herman!
Great. Who we need is Sylvester Stallone.
Pee-wee, what are you doing in Washington?
Oh, hi. I'm doing a show here tonight. All my props got lost at the airport.
Oh.
What I need the most is a ray gun. Hey, this isn't a ray gun. It's a cops and robbers gun. Bang! Bang! Bang!
Excuse me. Could I have my gun back, please? No. Give me the gun. Give me it. Come on.
He said, please.
Pee-wee! That's a real gun. He's a robber.
He doesn't look like a bad guy.
Yeah, well, I can look a whole lot badder,
Does your mother know you're doing this?
Who are you, Oprah Winfrey or something? All right, come on, everybody in the storeroom, quick.
I love your show, Miss Winfrey.
There's another show. Have you ever heard of Madam's Place?
No, I have to say, even to me, that one's not ringing a real bell.
Madam's Place is really interesting. I can't remember the name of the original creator of it, but Madam is a puppet, and she's like this kind of upper crust madam woman, almost like very, very, very distinguished, aristocratic American woman, very upper class, and she has this family around her, and Pee-wee is as a guest star, as a potential person to date, I think either her daughter or her niece or something like that. It's a very strange show because it's all these real people based around a puppet, which is really goofy.
I have no memory of this.
There you go.
How you doing, sweetheart?
It's fine, thanks.
Pee-wee, I'm probably the most honest star in Hollywood, and I have to tell you, I wasn't too crazy about the idea of you coming on my show.
You probably thought I was going to be a goofball or a nerd or a spaz or something. Sure had you fooled.
Yeah. You had me totally snafu'd, Pee-wee. Totally. Well, listen, I'm sure America's dying to know who Pee-wee Herman's favorite comedians are.
Well, I used to like Soupy Sales a lot and Pinky Lee, but my favorite comic was probably a guy named Eddie Veitch.
Eddie Veitch?
Yeah, boy, was he funny.
Who's Eddie Veitch, pray tell?
Eddie Veitch was this kid who used to sit behind me in the second grade. He could even make a Kleenex dance.
Really? How did he do that?
He used to blow a little boogie in it.
So anyway, there's all these appearances, some small appearances. Perhaps the strangest thing, and I found out about this by watching the various talk shows, is he's like, well, I'm going to be playing Pinocchio soon too with Carl Reiner, and so
yes, this is the
whatever story hour.
With, Shelley Duvall, right?
With Shelley Duvall.
That was a show I grew up watching. When I was real little.
So interesting. I mean, this would have been early HBO, I think is what it was. I think, was it HBO?
You know what? It probably was, just because my earliest, memories are really, for the most part, when I was really little in Ohio. And that was when my dad got the Betamax, and that was when we had HBO. And I remember at that point, it was at that point in my life that was a show that I watched fairly regularly. So it must have been HBO, though I haven't seen that since I was 5.
Yeah. So it's on YouTube. You can find it. Carl Reiner is Geppetto. And I have to say, he's the best part of the show, Carl Reiner. I mean, if you want to talk about meta, the Pinocchio with Pee-wee played by Paul Reubens, that is some layers there.
Because it's billed as Pee-wee Herman as Pinocchio, correct?
Yeah, yes. So it really is that. It's Pee-wee Herman, or we could say Pinocchio acting as Pee-wee Herman, because it's like he brings the Pee-wee character into the Pinocchio character. It's a strange experience. Well, I didn't exactly like it.
Even later in life, though, he would, he kind of embraced that again, where he would do, appearances at conventions as Pee-wee Herman, and it was billed as Pee-wee Herman. Or his Twitter account was Pee-wee Herman. It wasn't Paul Reubens.
Okay. Well, and that I will grant him. I like that. I love it. Like on the street, real world stuff. There's some actually more recent clips of him walking around New York City as Pee-wee Herman interacting with people. It's brilliant. I mean, I love that kind of stuff.
But Pee-wee playing another character is
but not just any character. He's playing the puppet boy that became a real boy. Like, it's like Pee-wee is Pinocchio. Do you understand? Like the Pee-wee character is a kind of Pinocchio. And it's just, to me, it didn't work. It was a bit bizarre, and yet I couldn't look away. I was like, okay, all right. And what was actually really strange, I need to go back and rewatch this again. At the very end, when he becomes a real boy, he actually changes personas. He becomes more like Paul Reubens at the very end. And so, I mean,
there's something deeply psychological going on here.
You must be.
Yes, Sophie. And I see our little friend here is beginning to warp.
I didn't do it on purpose.
I know, Pinocchio, I know. Because you have learned to care more about others than you care about yourself. And because you have learned to be a kind and a loving person, you have earned the right to become a real live boy. Ooh.
Real life boy! Oh boy, And I have a real father and a regular nose. Ow, that hurt!
He was doing something with that. Like, he was taking that in his own artistic direction.
By the way, you did a really good job of it. You did a pretty good nasally Pee-wee voice. One of the things that just blows me away about Pee-wee, the character, and about Paul Reubens' performance is just how the way he shifts his voice from one level, from one range to another. And it's like two completely separate voices, and he'll change mid-sentence.
Yeah.
Effortlessly. Yeah. I couldn't do it if I tried.
So anyways,
How you been?
I've been fine.
Yeah, good.
How about you?
Fine, just fine.
Good.
Nice to see you again.
Thanks. It's wonderful to be here on Halloween and everything. Gonna just make myself a quick little drink right here. This is jack-o'-lantern ice. Yeah. Can you believe it?
No.
You can't believe it. La la la. Uh-oh. Look, I got a whole bunch of cool candy and junk for Halloween. Look. Hot dog gum. Hot dog gum. Would you like a piece of hot dog
No.
gum? No. Can't interest you. How about a piece of chocolate?
No thanks.
Rubber chocolate.
So actually, you know what? I think I'm really glad you brought that up. You reminded me of something that I wanted to talk about, which is in going down this rabbit hole, one of the weird experiences or feelings is jumping back and forth between Paul Reubens and Pee-wee. I like to bring up Elmo, or maybe Kermit the Frog as my examples, is I kind of still believe they're real. Right? Like, there's a part of me that when I see Elmo and I'm like, I would actually talk to Elmo. I'd be like, hey, Elmo. And I would interact with Elmo and I would believe. Like, there's a part of me, I suspend my disbelief. And I have, Pee-wee is that way. Like, there is something about Pee-wee that seems real. And I kind of still believe. And so you're right, to see him switch back and forth, it is almost like he's a different person. Like, it's very strange.
I had an experience, this was years ago. Joey was probably 2 or 3 years old. And I was at a convention covering an event for my radio station. I worked at an oldie station at the time. And I had the opportunity to interview Carol Spinney. You familiar with Carol Spinney?
Is she talk?
Yes. What's her voice?
Well, no, Carol Spinney is a guy.
Oh, wait. No, I don't know who you're talking about.
Carol Spinney is the actor. He's since passed away, but
for
50 years played Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch.
Carol Spinney, yes.
So,
talk about an icon, right?
It was at the time. I think it was like I think it was like his 40th year of doing the character, and I did just a real brief little interview with him, and I at the end, I asked him if he would say hi to my son as either Big Bird or Oscar, which he very graciously did.
Hi, Joey. It's me, Big Bird. Yeah, Joey. Have a rotten day. Oscar.
And I've got to tell you, he said this little message to Joey as Big Bird and Oscar talking to each other. And I was shook. Right. I was suddenly, I'm standing there with him, a grown man. I was 4.
All right.
It was a surreal experience.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like there is something about that, like I have going back and watching Pee-wee's Playhouse, I have a much deeper appreciation for it than I had when I was, 6 or 7 years old. But man, there is a part of me that like, it just unlocks this part of me that I haven't been in touch with since I was, that small.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
But even when he's just completely in character, the way he shifts from his inner voice to his inner voice, like the way he just goes back and forth in character, it's a very manic performance, and it's truly something to behold. And he does it effortlessly.
Yeah.
Like it's just like it fits him like a glove. That character, he was born to play that character. And so going back to that Facebook post or whatever it was that, social media thing that you were talking about a little bit ago, about the guy saying, well, like, he did a lot of other work. Well, yeah, he did do a lot of other work, and he was great at all that. But man, like, let's just take a moment and say this guy created something really special and really iconic. And he deserves to be praised for that too.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like you said, he defined the 80s, and what do we even do with that, right? And that's part of his fall too, because it was quite the fall. But let's lift up the achievements here. I guess I have one more place I want us to go, and this actually, it relates to that original comment. Do you have a favorite non-Pee-wee performance? Do you have one? Because I have one in particular that I want to raise up as one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
A favorite non
so
Paul Reubens performance.
Paul Reubens performing, so here are some examples. He was on Murphy Brown.
He was on Raymond. I remember that.
Was he on Raymond? He was in Meatballs Part 2. He was in Reno 911. He was in Blow with Johnny Depp. He was in a movie called Pandemonium. He was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He was on Mork and Mindy. Like he was on Sesame Street. I mean, he did a lot of stuff. He actually had a couple of voice roles in Star Wars Rebels. Like he
really
made his way
I've watched that series all the way through twice, but I don't think I realized he was in it.
I think it was a droid, and it was pretty
Okay.
pretty minimal. Yeah. Oh, Batman Returns.
Oh gosh, Batman Returns. I know that's a really small role, but that was a big one. That movie was huge.
He was
for
Chester
me.
Potter, the
His
Penguin's
dad. He was the Penguin's dad.
Yeah, he was his dad. Yeah,
and I think he ended up playing the Penguin's dad again on the show Gotham.
He did. Yeah, that's right. He did. I never seen that, but yes, he did. He was in Danny DeVito's film Matilda. He was like an FBI agent, which I actually have seen in the last year. I've seen that movie Matilda a few times now. Yeah, you should go watch it. He actually has a decently prominent role in Matilda.
Okay, so there are a couple roles that do stand out to me. I don't even know if either of these would be my favorite. I haven't given much thought to what would be my favorite non-Pee-wee role, but I remember being in the theater watching Batman Returns and seeing him, and that was a year after the bust, and so it was a big deal to see him again on the big screen. And again, it was a situation where like the whole like Pee-wee thing had been shattered a year earlier, and then here he was, and he wasn't Pee-wee. So it was the first time I'd seen him in an acting role that wasn't Pee-wee Herman was in the theater for that movie. So that was a big deal, even if he was only in it for 5 minutes or whatever it was at the beginning of the movie. The other one that does come to mind, not even necessarily being a favorite either, because it was an okay thing, but it was seeing him show up on Everybody Loves Raymond, because I did watch that show every Monday night or whenever it aired. And when he showed up on that show, it had been the first time I'd seen him in quite a few years. And I remember just being really happy to see him. I was like, oh, cool. Like, oh, man, I'm really glad they brought him on. He played a character that he owned a comic book store. He was like the character Amy, Robert's wife on the show. It was her brother.
I'm looking for Russell. Is Russell here?
You IRS?
What?
Are you with the IRS?
No.
You look like IRS.
I do?
No, that's just it. You don't.
I'm a friend of your sister Amy.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm Russell.
Yeah, Ray Barone, Robert's brother.
Oh, Robert's brother. Get out. Thanks, Clarence. See you at the convention.
Listen,
Let me tell you about your brother. My little sister put 2 childbearing years into Gigantor. Then he dumps her without so much as a smack me bum.
I don't really know what you mean, but I think Amy was the one who broke up with Robert without the smack your bum.
Can you blame her? I mean, the guy's got no backbone. He can't commit to anything. What kind of person's that?
Yeah, well, Robert and I were really not that close. But listen, I saw you had a sign saying you got hacky-do cards.
We're closed. Good day, sir.
Paul Reubens only did one episode, and then I actually looked this up, and I read that they said he wasn't available, so they had to replace him. They replaced him with Chris Elliott. The funny thing about, well, it's not funny, but it's weird. Weird thing about this is, do you know who played Paul Reubens' character's father on that show?
No, I wouldn't have any clue.
Okay, well, they weren't in the same episode together, but he played that character, and then in a later episode, once Chris Elliott took over the role, his father was also introduced. It was Fred Willard.
Okay, yeah. Well, there you go, right? Yeah.
Who was arrested for the same thing that Paul Reubens was. Like father, like son.
There you go. Yeah, what a beautiful connection that you just made there, Joe.
It never occurred to me until after, I was revisiting all this stuff, doing my own little rabbit hole with it. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, that's weird. That's really weird.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness, that's funny. And that's funny because
may they both rest in peace.
I know, right?
Yeah, you almost feel bad bringing it up, but it's weird.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's interesting. Towards the end of his life, he has all kinds of voice roles. He was in a Tron show. He was in Tron, like a Tron Uprising. I've seen that show. I really like that show, by the way. It's a Disney kind of like more like teen.
Oh, was it like
animated
a Disney XD show or something like
Yeah.
that? Animated?
Yeah, it's actually a good show. I really enjoyed that. He was in Comedy Bang Bang, like as a guest. Phineas and Ferb. He was on Phineas and Ferb.
Do you know who he was on Phineas and Ferb? Because I've watched quite a bit of that.
Professor Parenthesis or Parentheses.
Professor Parentheses. I'll have to look this up. I love Phineas and Ferb.
He was on one of my favorite shows, the vampire comedy show, What We Do in the Shadows. He had a really good guest appearance in that show. But my number one of all time, I mean, one of the funniest things I've ever seen, he shows up in an episode of 30 Rock. And he is, what is his name? Gerhard Habsburg.
Oh, I've seen that. Oh, that's tremendous. I forgot about that. Oh, my goodness.
And it is just one of the most bizarre, hilarious performances ever. And I'll just, what can I say about it other than just go watch the show? But he plays the heir of the Habsburg Empire. And what's funny about it is he's so inbred, this character, generation after generation of inbreeding that basically his whole body is falling apart. And he's like, he can barely function. And it's just so funny because what's the blonde? What's her name on there? She is like, perhaps, thinking of marrying him.
I can't remember her character's name. Jane Krakowski's character.
Jane Krakowski's character.
Oh, let me close.
Oh, my dear Jenna. You are exquisite!
Gerhard, would you like to dance?
Sadly, because my body does not produce joint fluid, I cannot. But I would enjoy watching you dance for me.
Oh. All right, then.
Jazz! Cap! Jitterbug! Charleston! Interpretive! Twirl! Twirl again! Keep twirling!
And she's smitten with him because of his money. And then there's this moment, like you can see this picture where he has this tiny shriveled up hand and he's like touching her face with his shriveled up hand. And it's,
that's another show that I barely watched when it was originally on, but a couple years ago went back and binged the whole thing, and I forgot that he was in that. That was tremendous, man.
There you go. And so that's one of my favorite non-Pee-wee things that he did. And I think it's also worth mentioning Mystery Men. Mystery Men is fun.
Oh yeah, Mystery Men. Yeah.
So he didn't make as many Pee-wee movies as maybe he wanted to, but he lived a life.
He had his setbacks, but he he persisted.
Yeah, he had other setbacks too, by the way, but he did.
He did.
There you go, Paul Reubens, the legend. Yeah.
Well, that ended on a sour note.
That's all right. He'll live on. We'll forget about it. Oh, you know what? I will say this. Let's end on a happy note. In the last couple of years, the guy Jesse Thorne of the pop culture podcast that he does, Bullseye, he had a Pee Wee Herman radio hour, and you can still find that online. And it is Paul Reubens as Pee Wee hosting an hour-long radio show. And he gets to play his favorite music. He brings in some of the characters from Pee Wee's Playhouse. It's great. It's fun. It's a fun hour. He plays his favorite songs. It's goofy. It's like a lost episode of Pee Wee's Playhouse, kind of.
Is this the thing that he did on an actual radio station?
It was on an NPR station, I think out west, like maybe NPR LA or something like that.
Yeah, I remember this being in the news when it happened. He had wrote them a letter or something asking if he could go on the air or something like that, and they didn't actually really believe it was really him.
Okay, yeah.
Hello, everyone. It's me, Pee Wee Herman. Welcome to my radio show. Are you listening?
Hello? Hello? Is this thing on? I'm coming to you live from KCRW's studio at Santa Monica City College, not to name drop, in Santa Monica, California. I'd like to give a big shout out also to my listeners in Antelope Valley and Mojave. Hello! I'm so excited to be living out my dream of becoming a disc jockey. I must confess to you personally, as my very close friends, I was worried I'd be too big since jockeys are so short and records are even smaller than horses. So imagine my relief when I found out the disc jockeys don't actually ride the records. They just play them. Who knew? Certainly not me.
It's really fun. I really think people should check it out. It's kind of like a fitting end because you're like, oh, okay, he did Pee-wee within the last few years of his life. Okay, this is nice,
I'll say this because we didn't really touch on the Pee-wee's Playhouse gang.
Okay,
it was a pretty impressive cast that he had there. I mean, John Paragon, who I remember, my dad, used watching John Paragon like in the 80s and being a fan of his. I had no idea it was the same guy. Phil Hartman was in the first season. He was Captain Carl. Lawrence Fishburne. You ever think that maybe Lawrence Fishburne has nightmares in the middle of the night where he's just back in the playhouse?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's hilarious. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, right? The people that appeared on the show and also like the people that were staples, like Miss Yvonne, right? Is that her name?
Yeah,
that Yvonne. She never became anything really outside that show, but
but a character actor who did a lot of work outside the show. I think she was in American Graffiti and and even still, I don't know if she still acts today, but was doing stuff in the last decade. Different sitcoms and whatnot. And there are things that I've seen her in that I had no idea that's who it was.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. So the Pee-wee effect kind of spreads wide, and it's funny.
That kid Randy, wasn't he a jerk?
Yeah, who played Randy? He never got work after the show either, right?
Randy's canceled.
Uh-oh, here comes trouble. It's Randy.
Hiya, Pee-wee. Hiya, Pod Terry.
That's pronounced Terry. The P is silent.
Oh, okay, Ewee.
That wasn't very nice, Randy.
You'll get over it. What's this? Ice cream soup.
Yeah, I just have to put a little bit more chocolate in it.
You need more than that. Let me show you.
Oh! Andy! Andy! Stop it! Stop! Stop it! Andy!
There you go. Ice cream soup. See you later.
It's ruined!
There's way too much chocolate in my ice cream soup.
My snack is ruined!
Which is funny because Randy is kind of a strange alter ego of Pee-wee, right? Like they're there to kind of battle each other a bit, They're dysfunctional in their own ways. And
you got to watch the Christmas special because there's this. It's so weird because there's this scene with Randy where he's just like crapping on the commercialism of Christmas, and we're watching it, and we're dying, but like my son turns to me, he goes, he's got a point.
Yeah.
and then they respond by cutting to one of the they would show little documentary clips to be educational, but usually they weren't like very good. Like it was one of the early episodes they did a thing on Hawaii, I think it was, and it was like the education of Hawaii was like it was all about poo-poo platters, so that way they could make poo-poo jokes afterward.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So not really educational, but in the Pee-wee special, they literally cut to this old it looks like home movie footage of a nativity play, and they start talking about the birth of Jesus, and it was just like, this is so weird in this context. you're sitting there watching it going, I don't know if this is sincere or not, but it's here.
Well, and that's what he did, right? He threw all these things together. And that's, for some reason, it worked. And like you said, ahead of its time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, rest in peace, Paul Reubens. And he left behind a tremendous body of work. And at least, we're never going to have that dark Pee-wee movie, but we do have a lot of stuff to go back and watch and a lot of stuff to discover still.
Yeah. Maybe the script will leak and we can imagine what it would have been like.
They can do it with AI now. They can.
Oh, that sounds perfect.
Yeah, what's creepier than an AI Pee-wee?
Let's green light that thing. It'll come out tomorrow. Well, it's been good chatting, and see you next time. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Nostalgic Future Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at nostalgicfuturepodcast@gmail.com. We may just read your letter on an upcoming show. Follow us on social media, Nostalgic Future Podcast on Facebook and @PastFuturePod on Twitter. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review to help support what we do. Until next time, remember, the past is the only way forward.
This is crack, rock cocaine. It isn't glamorous or cool or kid stuff. It's the most addictive kind of cocaine, and it can kill you. What's really bad is nobody knows how much it takes. So every time you use it, you risk dying. It isn't worth it. Look, everybody wants to be cool, but doing it with crack isn't just wrong. It could be dead wrong.